Well, hey there, Farm Life family. It's Brent Adams, host of Inside Farm Life, and I'm back with another episode of Inside Farm Life, and you can hear that in its entirety following these messages. It's another jam-packed episode, and we start out with another great indicator that things are starting to open back up in our country. Coming out of Indianapolis this week, the National FFA Organization announced that they're going to hold an in-person national convention in late October. And we've got some of the details there for you this week, so you're going to want to hear that. Then we bring in Mark Jekanowski, who is the USDA Outlook Chairman. He gives us some current production levels for beef and hogs and broilers, and also gives us some 2022 projections, and some of those have some real strengths in them, so you're going to want to hear those. Then we bring in Aaron Belanger, who is the farm show manager for AGCO. You know, like many of the manufacturers, AGCO had to change course during the pandemic and find different ways to market and sell to consumers. And one of the things that they did was create one of the best in-show virtual product showrooms. And we get to talking about some of the technology behind that, as well as how they intend to use that going forward as things start to open up. People can get back into dealerships again, and also these farm shows come back online. They're still going to use that in different ways, so we'll talk more about that. We also hear from our friend Jesse Allen talking about a volatile week in the markets in this week's Market Talk report, especially in the corn market following that May WASDE report. A lot of ups and downs there, so you want to hear that. Then we bring in our buddy, the hot rod farmer, Ray Bohacz. He's talking about that annoying carbon knock that you sometimes get and how you can head that off at the pass. Then we start talking true traditional country music and back to the country. This week we bring in my friend Dave Wilbert, who is a great 90s throwback style artist. He has a song that's screaming up the chart called It's All Yours. You're going to want to hear that. You can hear him at davewilbertmusic.com. Just one of the many great true traditional country music artists you're going to be hearing here. And I want you to follow along. If you're not already, make sure you're following Farm Life on Facebook and also the Facebook group, because we're going to be sharing all the details on everything we've got coming up in the coming weeks and months, and it's going to be a whole lot. We're going to be launching a brand new website, a companion podcast, and agriculture and country music live streams. We're going to educate, we're going to inform, we're going to entertain. There's going to be so much there, but you're not going to be able to find out about any of it unless you're following us there on the Farm Life Facebook and Facebook group pages. So go follow those, and thank you so much to everybody who's already been following those, liking, sharing, commenting. Please continue to do so, and please share those links with your friends so we can get the word out. You know, we really are focused on trying to grow the biggest agricultural community on the planet here, and we will do that with the help of you guys. We're on to something special here, so please go tell a friend so we can continue on to build that movement. Well, I'm going to get on out of here. I want to thank you again so much for all the love that you show Farm Life and Inside Farm Life. We want you to come back week after week after week, and as we always say, bring along a friend. Now I want to present to you the latest episode of Inside Farm Life. Welcome to Inside Farm Life, your weekly connection to agriculture newsmakers, hot-button industry issues, educational features, and the best in true country music. I'm your host, Brent Adams, and I thank you for giving us some of your time this week. We have another jam-packed show, so we'll get right to it. This week we start off talking FFA. The National FFA Organization has announced it will hold its annual in-person convention this fall in Indianapolis. The event, which traditionally brings more than 65,000 attendees, will take place October 27th through the 30th. Expected in-person events during the convention include the American FFA degree ceremony, career success tours, competitive events, delegate business sessions, entertainment, the National FFA Expo and Shopping Mall, general sessions, student and teacher workshops, and the National Days of Service. In addition to the in-person event, the organization also will offer a virtual program, including student and teacher workshops, the virtual FFA Blue Room, National Days of Service, and the streaming of general sessions. We'll have more on the National FFA Convention in the coming weeks here on Inside Farm Life, so I hope you'll come back for that. Also on our plate this week, meat. As COVID restrictions ease, the nation's meat producers are in the process of once again making a big change to the meat supply chain, as we hear from USDA Radio's Gary Crawford.
As restaurants and other parts of the food service sector begin to operate somewhat normally again,
beef supply chains have to kind of refocus.
And not just beef, but most meat products to some extent. This from USDA Outlook Board Chairman Mark Jekanowski. Of course, we started pre-COVID with restaurants, hotels, schools open for normal business.
And then the supply chains got this big hiccup with COVID when everyone started eating at home and lost that food service business for a while. And now with restaurants reopening, the supply chains have to refocus again and ramp up to serve that food service sector.
And Mark says it wouldn't surprise him that there might be some small hiccups in that process, leading to a few temporary problems for the food service sector in suddenly trying to secure the meat supplies they will need. There have already been some news reports of hotels and restaurants having to look longer and harder and pay a little more to get the meat they need. But Mark says this is likely to be a small, short-term situation.
Well, as we grapple with changes to the meat supply, Jekanowski has some new projections for meat production as we look ahead to 2022.
Agriculture Department analysts are forecasting for 2021 what they call a
short-term surge in beef production.
USDA Outlook Board Chairman Mark Jekanowski says his group has upped its forecast for this year's beef output by 260 million pounds, up to 27.9 billion. What's happening is that more cattle are being pulled in a hurry into and out of feedlots this year.
It's because of poor forage conditions and tight hay supplies. And then there's also incentive to get them out of the feedlot quick because of the high feed costs.
So cattle that might have been run through the system next year are going through this year.
That's why for 2022, we're showing a little bit of a year-over-year decline in beef production.
A decline from this year of only about 2%, but it would be the first yearly drop in beef output since 2015. USDA says average steer prices could rise next year by about 4.5%. Feed costs, though, to go up 20 to 30%.
And while beef production might be on the decline next year, Jekanowski is projecting an increase in hog production next year. That could bring hog prices down considerably from current high levels.
The Agriculture Department's forecasting that for all of this year, hog prices will average $1.50 a hundredweight higher than what USDA was projecting just a month ago.
Hog prices are high, and we expect that to encourage more production into 2022.
USDA Outlook Board Chairman Mark Jekanowski. Right now, USDA has pork production for this year at 28.2 billion pounds. Next year, add another 320 million to that, so an increase of only about 1%. But even so, Mark thinks average hog prices will be coming down in 2022 from this year's average of $67.18 a hundredweight.
We actually have it down by about $11.43.
A decline of about 17%. Again, a combination of
larger supplies into next year and maybe some softening of demand,
which has been this year very, very strong.
And finally, Jekanowski took a look at the broiler industry, which he believes is poised for higher output and stronger prices.
Prices right now are very high. Demand is strong.
Production is just barely keeping up with that demand right now.
But given the current high prices, we expect production to continue to ramp up.
And prices to continue high. In fact, average wholesale broiler prices are running much higher than USDA was projecting just a few weeks ago.
For 2021, for broilers in particular, just this month alone, we increased our price estimate by 8 cents a pound to 92.7 cents per pound. And we expect that to hold relatively steady into the new year, into 2022.
Even though broiler production next year could be up from this year by more than 500 million pounds at over 45 billion.
And one final item of note this week, you've probably heard about this on the news. If you haven't already heard them outside of your home, the cicadas are arriving. What's behind the mystique of the 17-year emergers? Gary Crawford explains.
It's happening now in parts of the eastern U.S., a developing story that's got everything.
Birth, death, predation, murder and mayhem, romance in the treetops. What more could you ask for?
I don't know. That's University of Maryland entomologist Michael Raup.
Also known as the bug guy.
Well, I guess you could be called worse things than that.
I've been called those.
Yeah. But do you care? No, not this year. The year when the 17-year cicadas stop sucking sap from tree roots deep underground and dig their way up in unison from their subterranean crypts. Why?
It's all about romance and love.
Yeah, loud love. In the treetops as the males sing mating songs to the females, and soon millions of little baby cicadas will drop from the trees, dig their way underground to live until the year 2038 when they'll be back again.
And bring fun, fear, and fascination to millions of people.
Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Many companies promise increased yields and a higher return on investment, but again and again, results show that one company stands apart from the rest. Concept AgriTek delivers innovative concepts utilizing the latest technologies in agronomy, biology, and chemistry to enhance soil and plant health with seed treatment, planter-applied fertilizers, foliar fertilizers, and full-season soil treatment solutions. To find out how to put Concept AgriTek to work for you, visit conceptagritech.com. Concept AgriTek. Technology where you need it most. Well, next up on Inside Farm Life, farm equipment manufacturers had to work quickly in 2020 to pivot when the pandemic rendered dealer showrooms closed or forced strict limitations. Many began turning to digital product showcases, and one of the most comprehensive out there has been assembled by the team at AGCO. In September 2020, AGCO launched AGCOVirtualShowroom.com, a virtual online showroom that made well-known brands and equipment available to viewers at any time from any place. The virtual product showroom has been well received and continues to receive updates, with the most recent coming earlier this month with the introduction of AGCO Theater, which is a state-of-the-art gathering place for live and recorded events and product video collections. So today I wanted to bring in Aaron Belanger, the farm show manager for AGCO, to talk about the work that went into creating the virtual product showroom and how it will continue to be an important piece of the AGCO sales and marketing puzzle, even as the nation begins to open back up. And Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today here on Inside Farm Life.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to be here, Brent. We are in incredibly different times than we were a year and a half ago. We finished up Commodity Classic in March, and the world fell off the event schedule, just went to zero after that. So we found ourselves with a lot of time, right? There were going to be events. I didn't want to sit back, and we had problems, right? We had new problems. How do we do in-cab demonstrations, right? We can't get two people that close together. How do we do that? How do we deal with the COVID? How do we deal with even people wanting to go into dealerships at that time? We really had a lot of unknowns. So we took at that time, almost a risk and said, hey, let's develop this entire virtual space with all our products that we can use. Again, if this didn't turn out to be a long-running thing, it might have been something that we spent a lot of money on and didn't get a lot of use. But we're finding it's got a lot of use, and we see some potential to use it in the future.
Well, AGCO has always had a large presence at many of the nation's premier farm shows. Historically speaking, how important have those shows been to the company's marketing efforts, and how has the virtual product showroom been able to fill some of that void?
So what we found is the big show for us here in North America is Farm Progress. So they also didn't want to sit back and take a year off. So they went with a virtual field demo experience. We participated in that. There's very limited as far as the people that could be there because of COVID. And all that was then virtually televised and virtually presented to folks out there in the cyber world. Yeah. I think that's kind of the crossover to where we talk about now hybrid events, where we're going to have this group of people that this year aren't vaccinated and maybe don't want to come to the show. And then the group of people that are say, hey, one way or the other, I want to go to a show. So we have to now cater to those two audiences. Yeah. So I think what you'll find is we'll have a good bit of our in-person events either simulcast or produced in a way that they can be accessed via the web.
So at the height of the pandemic, AGCO launched the virtual product showroom in September 2020, and it allows North American consumers to take a deeper dive into the offerings from many of the AGCO brands, including Massey Ferguson, Fendt, Challenger, Gleaner, Rogator, Terragator, and GSI, among others. Tell us about the technology behind the showroom, because AGCO pulled together a lot of stuff in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, the list goes on. The number of brands we have seems like it just keeps growing, but that was one of the issues. I don't want to call it a problem, but one of the issues that I saw is kind of an outsider. I've been with AGCO about 5 years, but here you have all these brands and they have their individual brand channels, but this was an opportunity to gather all that into one place. So if you really wanted to get a feel for the entire AGCO lineup, this is a great starting point because you can visit each of those brands individually, but they're all captured in this neat virtual interactive world that encompasses all the brands. Now, if we want to talk about the technology, we've kind of done something different. You can go 100% virtual and you can create 3D modeling of all your tractors and literally make it like a video game
And we've taken some of those elements, but we've combined them with real life photography. And there's a really great company we work with called Pix Riot. And that allows us to stitch photos together to make a really cool 360 degree kind of, again, virtual experience with that piece of equipment. It allows us to zoom in, and the clarity is actually pretty amazing. But it derives from 72 individual shots that we took on a rotisserie, basically turntable in our Heston facility. And then we stitch those together to make one seamless, basically image that you can spin around, zoom in, tilt, back and forth. Then on top of that, we can layer again back to the virtual thing where we can layer a hotspot. And then if you select the hotspot, that can take you off to a YouTube, a Vimeo, standard URL web address. So we've really combined kind of the best of photography and what's out there virtually. And that's kind of the basis of the whole environment.
So how long did it take to get from the initial conversations and the concept to the actual launch phase?
So we started off very fast. I'm lucky enough to have a great executive team and, not very many people above me that have to sort through things and don't have an open vision and an open mind to let us do what we want at AGCO. So I basically pitched it to them. I said, we're not going to do farm progress. We've got some money here. Let's run it basically like a farm show where we brought in detailers, we brought in our setup people, we brought in photographers and so on. Now we had to, again, have all the COVID stuff in effect. So we had our own building separate from the manufacturing facility. We had a whole bunch of controls where we had to monitor everybody and keep our distance. But it probably still took us almost 2 months to run every single product that we had at the time through there. There were some exceptions. There's some very large planters that we had to take and do at a separate facility. And then there's some derivations of things that we know are probably going to go away or just either are too big or such a small seller that we didn't photograph. So we're not truly at 100%, but we definitely have in the 90 percentile of all the equipment that AGCO has to offer.
So when folks walk through the door of the AGCO virtual showroom, they're actually walking through the doors of your beautiful AGCO Intivity Center in Jackson, Minnesota, which features an assembly plant and a corporate museum. Why was that particular setting chosen to be the showpiece for the virtual showroom?
Well, you gave away one of my secrets.
Uh-oh.
Yes, it's not an AGCO dealership. It is our Jackson facility. We actually have a very nice Intivity Center there, museum. Has kind of a history of AGCO and also a little shop where you can purchase things. I liked it as an opening shop because it has a wide expanse. I could position some tractors outside there and it gave a feeling of a dealership. Hopefully you can't really tell it's a plant. And then once you get inside, the lobby kind of also lended itself to this feeling of, hey, this is a bigger structure. So I hope you don't feel that you're necessarily leaving the Jackson TV Center when you're going to each room, even though each of those rooms is virtually created. They don't exist at Jackson other than the initial room that you walk through the front door.
Well, it's a beautiful facility. And as you pointed out earlier, this 360 technology allows users to check out interior and exterior of the equipment, perform a virtual walk around, and access informational videos and downloadable product brochures. And users can customize machines for price quotes, as well as visit the company merchandise store, which I know is important to a lot of people.
Yeah, I tried to build in all those features that you, again, would find at each individual brand channel, whether you go to masseyferguson.com or fent.com. Again, you will find the same functionality in the virtual showroom that you will find for those individual brand sites. There are some, again, more detailed stuff that you might find at those sites, testimonials, some more pictures, that type of stuff. But as far as the general equipment and all the channels that you can go to get information and interact with AGCO, it's all in the AGCO virtual showroom.
So you have a few months under your belt now. What has the early feedback from consumers been like?
Well, what we're seeing, and I'll tell you what, I have learned a lot about computer sites. Yeah. Believe it or not, I was a computer engineer way back in 1990. I didn't finish that degree, but I knew enough to know that I don't know anything now. And what I learned, the couple of things I've taken away that I've been able to establish is that I can see when people are in it, they're spending a good 6 to 8 minutes in the website, which I'm told that's a long time to keep someone's attention. Because when you're online, you're competing with everything, right? You're competing with YouTube, you're competing with the news channel, every favorite they have on their computer. So there's a lot of competition. So the fact that I can hold them for that long tells me that we're getting some good movement through the site and that people are, generally engaging it and being active in it. The other is what they call a bounce rate, which is how many people click in and go, yeah, this isn't for me, and bail. That's almost zero. It's 0.087. So same thing, once they're in or they engage it, then I find that it does attract them. It keeps them going into and exploring the brand, which is really what I want to see. I want people to learn and experience AGCO like I do.
Well, that's phenomenal. And it shows you're on the right track. And the next iteration, as we talked about earlier, features AGCO Theater. How did this concept come about, and how does the company envision it being used going forward?
So our big picture is that this is the hosting environment for, again, each brand. It could even be internal. So like our purchasing department just had a big event for all our vendors. Again, it was part in person, but very few people in person and mostly virtual. So this then becomes kind of a standard portal that everyone can use. Before this was introduced, it's basically a shotgun approach. Some people run a WebEx, some people run a Zoom, some people run GoToMeeting. There's lots of different ways you can do it. But the idea is you can still do that from the back end, but this gives you that one specific spot that anyone with AGCO or affiliated with AGCO can go to. So you're going to kind of gather that, make that your welcome and your gathering place rather than sitting in a Zoom lobby, so to speak, waiting for the call to start.
Well, it's a great use of the technology, and it's incredible how AGCO adapted to the challenge of the pandemic so quickly and overcame with a phenomenal site. Again, for anybody who wants to take a look for themselves, head on over to agcovirtualshowroom.com. Again, that's agcovirtualshowroom.com. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on Inside Farm Life. We invite you to come back anytime you have updates to the virtual showroom or any other initiatives you think our listeners should be paying attention to.
We will, Brent. Thank you. We do have a couple planned here in probably next summer. And then again, we'll update with all our new 2022 products later this year.
Again, we've been speaking with Aaron Belanger, the farm show manager for AGCO. Well, up next this week on Inside Farm Life, if you could sum up the markets in one word this week, it would be volatility. And Jesse Allen is here to fill us in this week's Market Talk update. Jesse.
Well, thank you very much, Brent, for having me on this week's episode of Inside Farm Life with this Market Talk update. As we've been watching continued volatility throughout the commodity sector, we saw some broad selling days here this last week. And specifically looking at the corn market first, I talked with Mike Zuzolo of Global Commodity Analytics on Wednesday of last week during Market Talk. And we've seen the corn market really take a hit. A lot of farmers may be kicking themselves. They didn't make some sales before the May WASDE report. We're getting more news about a shrinking Brazilian crop and a lot of things to consider in this corn market. I asked Mike what his thoughts were or advice would be for producers who maybe didn't make as many sales as they wanted to before we saw a correction in this corn market, and now getting more news out there about Brazil and more China buying continuing. Here's what Mike had to say as he offered some advice to producers who maybe were kicking themselves a little bit.
A couple things. I think you're in a learning curve right now if you're a producer that's trying to sell on the way down. You and I have beat this pretty hard, this drum pretty hard about whether you sell on the way up and scale up sell and average your price up, or whether you wait for that high and then try and catch that falling knife. The December corn of this year did what it normally does. Normally what most commodities do is that went up about 13 or 14 days higher. It ran up $1 in about 13 days. And within 5 days, it had taken that dollar completely away. And if you include today, it's gone more, even down even harder by going below 530. And so we went from 540 to 640, back down to 540 in roughly 2 weeks of time or 3 weeks of time. And so this is where it goes back to the idea that you got to figure out which way you're going to be in terms of selling. And if you do start to see a high put in, you better be quick and get some sales made. I think we'll get a second chance in corn, but we're not out of the woods yet. I think this issue with the corn market being the strongest suit of cards, we got to remember corn's not an island, and these commodities and all these assets trade together. A lot of times the funds that are buying the corn are in an exchange traded fund buying something else or selling another commodity. And so we just got to get that through our heads in this environment we're in, because we're really going to get into some tough situations here in the next couple, 3 months because of interest rates and inflation. And we had a brand new one with what happened with the Bitcoin situation on Wednesday. That was in my opinion, Jesse, that was 70 or 75% of why the market sold off, including corn.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. It's not often we talk about Bitcoin on an agricultural market program, but you look at that broad sell-off that was seen in the market. Cryptocurrencies got hit hard. Obviously, that spilled over other equities, crude oil, everything. It was just a hard sell-off day. But talk about how we're seeing things like cryptocurrencies and other areas of the market spill over into commodities more and more. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, the common denominator in the crypto and trying to associate that with a market like corn is not just the investors and the investor class. And I talk to them almost on a daily basis in one way, shape, or form. The other thing is there's a common denominator on what's going on in both the crypto and the corn and grains and livestock markets. And it goes back to China. China decided they were going to come in and really ban crypto in a big, big way. And so if you look at this chart, we've got the cryptos at a whopping $2.2 trillion. Last fall, if memory serves me right, Jesse, that market was only $600 billion. It's more than doubled in just about a year. And so 2.2 trillion is crypto. 900 billion of that 2.2 trillion is Bitcoin alone. That's the one that traders are trading now, and you can get into and out of very, very quickly because the liquidity is increasing. But you see the cryptos are at 2.2 trillion, and you've got gold at 12 trillion. I've been scratching my head why the gold hasn't been going up here in the last 3 months with this inflationary talk. And I think it's because crypto buyers have been taking on crypto instead of gold, and it's been used as a substitute. It's kind of the new inflation hedge. I think that's going to end here. But if you keep following this, the S&P 500 is roughly 38 trillion, but then the big dog is the bonds, $128 trillion. So this is where I come in with the commodity analysis. And I say to my clients, look, if China is banning crypto, they're tightening and clamping down on commodity speculation. They're trying to rev up their coal production again to try and cool prices. That essentially is price controls. Why are they creating these price controls? Because they are fighting this inflationary pressure just like the rest of us, and even more so. And so if inflation gets to the markets enough, that interest rates go high enough, what happens to the bond market? What happens to the equities market? They typically will go down. And that's where these are all related and all correlated. And so that's what I'm watching is, does the Federal Reserve that just got done speaking earlier this afternoon before we went on air, do they ignite inflation, which ignites higher bond yields and interest rates? And does that create a sell-off in the bonds and the equities? And then that spills back over into gold and into cryptos. It's what we call a negative feedback loop and domino effect, essentially.
And again, that's comments with Mike Zuzlo of Global Commodity Analytics from last Wednesday's episode of Market Talk. You can find more about us online, markettalkag.com, and find Market Talk on all your favorite streaming platforms, or watch the video podcast on YouTube. This has been another Market Talk update for Inside Farm Life in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Jesse Allen reporting.
Well, again, you can find Jesse's daily market updates at markettalkag.com. Again, that's markettalkag.com. And you can find him by searching Market Talk on Facebook. He also appears on the American Ag Network, and you can hear him host Your Ag Today, weekday mornings about 6:50 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Satellite Radio, Rural Radio, Channel 147. Well, next up on Inside Farm Life, are you experiencing ticking noises in your engine? In this week's installment of Bushels and Cents, our buddy the hot rod farmer, Ray Bohacz, explains one possible culprit.
Welcome to Bushels and Cents from Farm Machinery Digest Radio, heard exclusively on SiriusXM Channel 147, Rural Radio. I am your host, Ray Bohacz, the hot rod farmer. And never forget, it is not what you make, but what you keep that counts. It is not uncommon with the tight clearances in modern gasoline and diesel engines for a tapping or ticking noise to occur on startup and as the machine is driven away from a stop. After a minute or so, it goes away. This is often a carbon deposit that formed on the piston crown and is contacting the cylinder head. Once the engine warms, the clearances expand and it is no longer making contact. treat a full tank of fuel with a high-quality cleaner that removes deposits, and that may be all that is needed. Agriculture runs on machinery, profits on reliability. Visit farmmachinerydigest.com, where steel and soil meet.
Again, you can check out all of Ray's great multimedia content at farmmachinerydigest.com. And if you like what you hear from Ray Bohacz, you can catch him on Farm Machinery Digest Radio on Sirius XM Rural Radio, Channel 147. It airs each Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern and again on Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern. So I hope you'll go and give him a listen. Well, now that we have the business out of the way, it's time to go back to the country, where each week we bring in a true country music artist who's taking country music back to the country where it belongs. This week we feature Nashville recording artist Dave Wilbert. The North Vernon, Indiana native has a great 90s country throwback sound and a new single that's poised to be one of the summer's big hits. Here it is now. This is Dave Wilbert with It's All Yours on Inside Farm Life.
You took my ring, you took a vow, you took my name in front of the whole dang town, took out a loan at my expense. Then you took a vacation with your ex-boyfriend. Now you're swimming in the ocean off the coast of Costa Rica, eating shrimp, shish kebabs, and drinking frozen margaritas. The house, the boat, the car, the truck, the diamond ring, and the rest of the stuff I've been breaking my back and busting my butt for. It's all yours. It's all yours. It's all yours. It's all yours. You took advantage of my heart. You took the balance to the limit on my Platinum MasterCard. It didn't take me too much time to finally open up my eyes and see you took me for a ride. Now you're on my leather sofa, eating chips and double dipping while you're watching pay-per-view on that new big screen television. The house, the boat, the car, the truck, the diamond ring, and the rest of the stuff I've been breaking my back and busting my butt for. It's all yours. Off the coast of Costa Rica, eating shrimp, shish kebabs, and drinking frozen margaritas. The house, the boat, the car, the truck, the diamond ring, and the rest of the stuff I've been breaking my back and busting my butt for. It's all yours. It's all
And that was Dave Wilbert with It's All Yours. You can find out more about Dave on his website, davewilbertmusic.com. And he's sure enough a good one, so make sure you keep an eye on him. Well, that's all the time we have for this week, friends and neighbors. For now, it's Brent Adams. Let's meet up here again next week. And hey, bring along a friend. You've been listening to Inside Farm Life, a production of Farm Life Media. If you have topic suggestions for future episodes, drop us a line at brent@farmlifemedia.com. And be sure to like the Farm Life page and join the Farm Life group on Facebook.